Hello and welcome to Filibusters in Fine Print, where AMGA's public policy team gives you the insider view on healthcare regulations and legislation. Thanks so much for joining us for the latest from Washington, D.C.
Hello, and welcome to AMGA's Filibuster and Fine Print, Episode 5. Daryl just informed me. I'm Chet Speed, your nominal host. I'm with the MGA policy experts. And why don't you all introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Lauren Latney, Director of Government Relations at AMGA, and my first concert was Troop at the Brunswick High School gym. Go Pirates!
Wow.
Troop.
Yeah. So, Daryl Drevna, Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs at AMGA. My first concert was Aerosmith.
Oh,
Sweet.
nice.
Oh,
That's a good
That's a
one.
good
We're
one.
talking.
Yeah.
My name's Alicia Sawyer. I'm the Government Relations Assistant for AMGA, and my first concert was Cheetah Girls, not to brag.
That is the ultimate brag, though.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We love
it's
Raven
the ultimate
Simone.
brag, and I had a beautiful sequin scarf. It was wonderful.
Disney Channel all the way.
Well, I did not have a sequin scarf, but my first concert was Charlie Daniels Band,
Okay, that's pretty
1981.
cool.
Wow.
All right. Well, and we obviously have a diverse set of interests here, and we have some pretty good topics to talk about today for our 5th episode. We're going to talk about DOGE and all things DOGE. Alicia, I understand that DOGE is now at CMS, and a couple questions for you. What is DOGE? And secondly, what are they doing at CMS? And I think we'll all talk about that as well.
Yeah, so DOGE is the Department of Government Efficiency. It was created by President Trump under an executive order, and it reorganized the U.S. Digital Service, which was an entity under the executive office that was created during Obama's administration. And so DOGE is looking to save $2 trillion across the board.
That'll be easy.
Yeah, and which is virtually impossible to do without cutting healthcare costs at some point. And Trump has been adamant that his administration will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid unless it finds abuse or waste. And I think the difficulty is defining what abuse or waste is, or what they're defining as abuse and waste.
That's where it gets really kind of interesting, right? Because you've got this team, these DOGE folks over at CMS, and they're trying to look into the various systems, sort of like under the hood of CMS. And you've got, CMS processes 1 billion claims a year, right? And they have all these procedures and processes in place to root out, waste, fraud, and abuse, and what is an improper payment and all that. So I don't see what it is they think they're going to find by looking at like the nuts and bolts of the payment system or the contracting system, because there are all these processes in place that already address what they say they're looking for: waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, I think some of it is like cosmetic, right? That's the easiest things to make juicy headlines. Like, oh, did you know that people had a Politico Pro subscription here, or that they get newspapers with the news in it? Like, these are easy things to cut. But yeah, it starts to after sort of those very superficial types of things. It starts to get a lot trickier in order to like cut things without hurting members of Congress because all of these things are connected and people want to keep programs that make them look good. So that's where the hard sacrifice is, and I'm curious where it goes.
Yeah, so this is outside the bounds of CMS, but NIH, you have a new funding mechanism that caps overhead at 15%. And for some, that felt very reasonable, of course. I mean, some of the private sector foundations have the same similar cap, but now I understand some Republican senators are saying this might devastate some of the economic centers of their states, which happen to be universities.
Right.
So
Senator Britt.
is that true?
Yeah, Senator Britt from Alabama, specifically named out a AMGA member, University of Alabama, Birmingham, and then how much that it will affect them in terms of, I think they're 30th in NIH research.
Mhm.
So you have, every state has a major research university. They really depend on NIH dollars to keep not only labs open, but keep people employed. Where do you draw the line of what is appropriate research, what is research that is going to be considered worthy of continuing and which doesn't? That means you're picking between favorite children, and members of Congress don't really like that.
I saw a University of Nebraska and had problems. Mitch McConnell's University of Kentucky had issues. Of course, more of UNL man, but UK is equally important. Yes, and that's the big deal. These things have unintended consequences, I guess, is what we were saying.
Yes, I mean, I think about University of Michigan. I have a cat. The cat needed a test. All the certain tests go to the University of Michigan to get tested because they have such a renowned animal testing program. So even when you're thinking about veterinary science, agriculture all throughout the country, there are impacts on these university funding that is goes deeper than honestly I thought about.
Yeah, I think Texas too. So, and can we back to CMS? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Or do you want to talk about it?
I love talking about CMS.
Let's go back to CMS
Yeah.
because you look bored. And so,
Yeah.
and so you were talking about some of the processes in place at CMS
Yeah.
around fraud, waste, and abuse. So
Right.
you worked at CMS.
I did, and they had at the time it was called the Program Integrity Group, the PIG, and they renamed that for obvious reasons. No one wants to work for, PIG,
Right.
right? But so you've got these systems in place, and so first, like take a step back. What is an improper payment? CMS has this really vague definition of payments that do not meet program requirements. That's what an improper payment is. But it could be an overpayment. It could be an underpayment. By and large, most of the time, if you have an improper payment, it's because there was like insufficient documentation. Someone made a clerical error along the way, right? So that's what we're talking about. Most of the time, we're talking about improper payments. How do you find these? Well, they've got these contractors, and I guess if you're looking into the contracts that CMS has, you've got these recovery audit contractors, the RACs.
Right,
Everyone
RACs.
loves, and they're essentially. I'm very excited. This is episode 5. The Empire Strikes Back, which has the bounty hunters in it. The bounty hunters are what like the providers sort of refer to as these contractors, right? Because they get paid a percentage of every dollar that they recover. They get a cut of that, and that's really the main system that CMS uses to monitor and police the Medicare program and make sure payments are for what they are intended to be, right? And that's how the system works. And then if you move past improper payments, it gets into that waste, fraud, and abuse, and you start getting to false claims, that sort of thing. And I think that's where your expertise lies.
Right, and I have to admit, I'm very excited. For the first time in 5 episodes, I have an answer, not just ask the question. So, I spent about 7 or 8 years in white collar crime, focusing really on healthcare fraud abuse. I worked for the providers for several years, and then ended up at HHS OIG, and so spent a lot of time in this waste, fraud, and abuse space. And to your point, CMS, and when there's a False Claims Act case, for instance, you have whistleblower. Whistleblower will allege various fraud. They will focus on some sort of billing within any healthcare enterprise. And CMS then gets all the claims around that whistleblower lawsuit. They sort of scrub it. It goes to OIG. It also goes to DOJ, usually the U.S. Attorney's Office in the field, where there is multiple reviews, potentially fraudulent claims. And then once we have that data set, as it were, then the big legal question is this a knowing violation of a False Claims Act? And to knowingly violate the act, you have to either have actual knowledge what you're doing is wrong, you have to have deliberate ignorance, or you have to have deliberate ignorance of what you're doing is wrong, or reckless disregard of the truth of the claim. So there is a several-step process into actually proving a False Claims Act case. And I think we have heard from members who are concerned about all this waste, fraud, and abuse discussion within the context of CMS or more generally the federal government. And I guess the answer, or just the advice we would give, is for it to become an actual fraud case, it takes months and months of preparation. And not only that, you need to have backup evidence that supports the idea that this is knowingly, submittedly, fraudulently. So it is very easy to go and say things are fraudulent. It is much harder to prove it.
100%. And like you said, it just takes forever to build a case. And they're not going to find something to build a case looking at the systems they're looking at. That's just not how the system works. I remember when I was at CMS, they built a case, and they'll find these these contractors are reviewing the claims. There's that. And then CMS has an idea of what they should be spending on a particular benefit for a particular part of the country. And when I was at CMS, this is 2005, so it's been a minute, but all of a sudden, claims for power wheelchairs shot up about 200% over 2 years. So everybody was getting these tricked out electronic wheelchairs, and all of a sudden the program was spending upwards of $1 billion on something they had spent like a fraction of that 2 years before. That's going to set off red flags, right? So you have
Right.
Operation Wheeler Dealer, they crack down as a DME issue. That's the type of thing that I think the teams at CMS and their contractors are going to focus on and understand, and not just we're going to look at the contracts that CMS has. We're going to look at every claim that comes through to see if this is, improper or not, because that's just an impossible task. That's not the systems. That's not how those systems are designed. That's not what they're used for. So whatever they think they're going to find, I'm fairly confident in saying they're not going to find it looking at, how CMS actually pays claims.
I agree. And it takes lots of people, lots of time.
So, and part of it, I think, is this is, it's not a policy or a waste, fraud, and abuse thing. It's a political move for them. And so I'm curious as to what the reaction on the Hill is to that a little bit.
I think right now, because there's Doge bipartisan coalition groups on this on the Hill, there is a little bit of like wait and see from what I can tell. Members on both sides are always talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. It's something that we push up against all the time when it comes to telehealth and all these things. It's something that is a cool phrase that members of Congress and their staff love to throw out. And so for right now, there does seem to be a little bit of giving the Doge group like a little bit of space. But we'll see as it continues, because I feel like once again, you start going after people's prize cows. You start hearing from providers, you start hearing from healthcare systems about the impact of these potential cuts. That's going to kind of pause some things, I think. And you're probably going to start seeing hearings around it, typical Congress doing their pageantry. But I'm sure behind the scenes, there's probably conversations that we're not curried to right now that are probably going to like maybe take a step back on some of these things.
Yeah, I think some of this is just headline grabbing. Like the administration is very good at, putting something out there and seeing what the reaction is while they're doing 18 different things as well. And I think if our members are concerned about this, they should know like the Doge team is over at CMS. That said, there are two senior professionals at CMS who are working with them, and I have every confidence they will do. I actually know the person. She's been around health policy for a long time. She used to work for the finance committee. She was with the program integrity group. So this is a seasoned professional who knows how these systems work. So if anyone wants to take solace in that, I'm fairly confident that she will ensure that the system keeps paying claims the way it's supposed to pay claims.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that's a concern, or could it be?
It's you see these headlines, and you've got all of a sudden the 19-year-old running around these computer experts, and so there's just this sort of environment of uncertainty and fear. So, but it's like to the ones going, do I have a contract with CMS on something outside of that? The regular payment system. I think that's where if I were to be concerned, it's like, are they going to stop paying this because they don't see the value in it? And then it gets into, can you legally do this? And that's a whole other, conversation. But, the fact that they've got these, computer experts over there, well, certainly not how we're used to operating. I know a couple episodes, I made the point like they, the Silicon Valley guys like to, move fast and break things. I sort of dismissed it, and I was like, well, maybe I have to eat my words a little bit, because that's what they're definitely using that playbook. But I think they're starting to run up against like there are people in place who are going to keep them in check a little bit.
And that's something to remind you that Congress is also run by 19 and 20-year-olds. So this is actually not out of turn to say, oh, I just feel like it's finally rippling to the agencies for the first time. But yeah, the average age, I think, of a House staffer is maybe mid-20s at this point. Senate's a little higher, but, the the foundation of our legislative system are particularly young people. So this is not too out of the course here.
So, Lauren, we're trying to provide solace to our members, and now you just scared us. Although, at least if you go to the Hill, that'll be just fine.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great.
We're very confident in you, without a doubt, because you've been part of AMJ.
But the children are our future. So
Unless we stop them now.
So, Riz. One of the things that members do have compliance departments within their systems. They have their own general counsel, they have outside counsel. They have scrubbed these things also. So I think they should be in pretty good shape. And you mentioned sort of things maybe slowing down. If you're a Democrat, if you're a federal employee, or if you're an establishment person anyway, thank goodness for the lawyers. The lawyers are actually getting very involved right now. The courts are highly involved. A lot of the executive orders, including the federal freeze on funding, has been challenged in court, litigated. A lot of temporary injunctions have been issued on a lot of these actions. So one of the branches of the government is actually looking at these things. And to your point, Daryl, some of these things are being slowed down as courts and judges and lawyers battle these things out.
it's a nice reminder, if you have a pocket constitution, maybe pull it out. Remember the separation of powers. People are in checks and balances. And you're definitely seeing some more checks than we've previously seen on a lot of things.
So
Yeah, I think this is like week 3? No, what,
4?
4? We're at week 4,
Four.
right? So, and I think, official DC moves slowly, right? And I think the actions the president and his team took just sort of caught folks a little flat-footed a little bit. But like you said, it takes time for those wheels to get moving. And it's like, okay, before we can file a suit to stop something, we have to know what that something is, and it'll work through its system. So
yeah. Yeah, I think, right. And we'll see where we are, in 6 months. And we can talk then. All right, we'll set a podcast for 6 months. And we'll talk about episode 5. And at that point, it'll be episode 50. Right? My guy says yes, so I think we're still in business.
Yeah. And, and then just, right before we came in to start recording, we had HHS secretary confirmed. So also you're going to have that, RFK Jr. is going to be in place, put his team in place. So it'll be a whole different department next week.
And indeed.
Yeah.
And that's a nice office too.
It is. I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
It's pretty sweet. Yeah. Any final words from the team?
No, I think, I would say you're going to see a lot of headlines that are, would give you a lot of angst, but take a deep breath. And I think everything will just work its way through, and we'll be okay.
Lisa?
I agree with Daryl. They're looking to be flashy with tweets, and I think that sometimes you just got to put the phone down.
Okay. Lauren?
Well, stick around for episode 50. That gives us job security at least, and we can see whether we're proven right or wrong.
It does indeed. And members, if you have any questions, always call us. We're here to help. All right, and that's it for episode 5. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thanks for joining us for Filibusters in Fine Print. This podcast was brought to you by AMGA. For more information about AMGA's advocacy efforts, visit amga.org/advocacy.